Hi everyone. In this video, I wanted to address the issue of mandating teachers and education workers to offer extracurricular activities. To recall, on June 30th, Premier Ford said, quote, "My message to the teachers' unions is one thing. Those kids have to be back in school in September, and they have to be back in school with extracurricular activities," end quote. For discussion on teacher and education workers' right to strike, please see my part 1 of this video. A precedent was set in 2013 by the Ontario Labour Relations Board, which appears to assert that extracurricular activities are part of our regular duties. This precedent was in response to 2 school boards that sought to prevent educators from collectively withdrawing from providing extracurriculars in protest of the then Liberal government's imposition of Bill 115, which imposed a contract and conditions on teachers. Today, the issue remains. How do you force people to do voluntary labor? Well, you can't. Teachers and education workers provide extracurricular activities on our own time, often after school, and always at the expense of ourselves and our own families. We do this because we know how necessary they are. By providing them as we have, we've been subsidizing the lack of proper full-time programming for the youth on a fully funded, organized basis in their communities on our backs. Why should extracurricular activities be based on the sacrifice of individual teachers and education workers, propping up a dilapidated education system that keeps putting more and more onto the backs of educators because the government refuses to take up its responsibility to the youth? Extracurriculars like education, healthcare, and all other social programs must be fully funded so they can be guaranteed as a right for all Ontario youth. This would actually make them essential. And let me repeat what I mean about being essential. Being essential doesn't mean the government gets to dictate that our work can never be withdrawn. Essential means that our work is so vital to student learning, and so the government has a responsibility to make sure it is fully supported so it can carry on. To even begin to consider that extracurricular activities are essential, first and foremost, every school requires access to the facilities for the sports we play in Canada. This means both indoor and outdoor facilities. It also means fully funded transportation to a facility if one is not located on school grounds or in walking distance, as well as fully funded transportation to travel to and for games. Each school would also need proper equipment that is replenished each year on an organized basis, not on the basis of parents' associations fundraising or individual educators taking on the task on their own time. And this needs to be separate from physical education budgets that also require equipment but for use for the entire school. Most importantly, schools need investments to either hire full-time coaches who are professionals, or if there are not enough fully trained coaches, then start paying people to become coaches, or provide training for teachers or education workers so that coaching is part of their paid duties. This must include being trained in first aid as well, so that on-site people are trained fully in health and safety, and also obviously in the more modern coaching techniques, which have come a long way. Having trained teachers or education workers as coaches means having adequate time to prepare for practices and games in the case of sports teams. Coaching is not just on the field. There are many time-consuming administrative aspects that have to be completed. In the case of clubs, this would also mean additional time because often educators sacrifice their lunch, their bathroom time, or time after school to sponsor a student club or activity. That extra preparation time would be needed to obviously be an extra period in high school and in elementary. And there should also be, wherever possible, both male coaches for male teams and female coaches for female teams. And there should be 2 coaches per each team so that there is always backup. Of course, this requires a big investment from the government, not only for training of staff, transportation, and equipment, but also to hire more teachers and education workers to make up for the extra preparation time for all those who lead these activities. However, it is very doable. That is, if the government is serious about recognizing them as essential. But the government knows we will not accept forced labor. So that's why I think they're setting up this fight, trying to make it look like we are against extracurriculars and want to close schools, instead of calmly addressing and negotiating what would be required to make extracurriculars essential, and with that, guarantee them for the youth as a right. It appears as if they just want to create justification to use force against us and set a precedent that the government can control our free time. In other words, they don't want to recognize or invest in what is actually required to make extracurriculars essential. They just want to make declarations and use police powers when we don't submit. If the government wants to make extracurriculars essential, let's talk about it. It will need to address the conditions that are required to do so. And if those conditions are not met, it will not be the fault of teachers and education workers who don't submit. It will be the fault of the government who does not actually recognize the essential nature of extracurricular activities for students.